Welcome to the podcast. The Aging Queen. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of The Aging Queen. I'm here with my regular guest, James from Columbus, Ohio. Hey, James.
Hey, how are you?
Good. And I'm Louis Canetti for those new listeners that have joined us. So today's topic is one that we've covered a little bit before in other episodes. It's about loneliness. The Surgeon General last year has declared loneliness in the United States is an epidemic, and it seems to be on the rise globally. What say you on this topic, James?
I mean, that's a very broad question. I mean, I guess, can you narrow it down a little bit? Because, I mean, obviously, loneliness is, I mean, there's a lot that somebody could say about loneliness.
Sure. Statistically speaking, gay men are more lonely than straight men. Gay
Hmm.
people are a lot more likely to commit suicide than straight people. Gay men have few close friends than straight people or gay women. And gay men are much more likely to be depressed than their straight counterparts. One of the reasons is minority stresses, also growing up gay, and the path from loneliness. There's actual therapy sessions that are targeted to gay people just for the specific treatment of loneliness. You can also be lonely being surrounded by a lot of different people or people in general. It's not doesn't mean you're alone. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness comes from a misconnection of lack of community, lack of adherence to social groups, um, just a lack of connection with our common man, with people.
Right, right, of course. Yeah, that definitely, I've seen that a lot. I mean, I feel like as people, we've probably all experienced loneliness at some point in time in our lives, and I can definitely say that, I could see like all the factors that you listed for, gay people being an issue because, like a lot of people, growing up gay, I guess for my generation, I guess it's being Generation X, like you had your friends, and, when you came out, you might have lost friends or you
Right.
might not have come out or it kind of goes back to the original topic of like making friends, and finding your community and finding your group. And for a lot of people, not just gay people, that's especially as adults, that gets very challenging,
Yeah.
you know because we all change. Like I'm most certainly not the same person that I was 20 years ago. um
Would you
I,
get into a relationship just because you were afraid to be alone, or to, even if it's not the person that you are in love with, would you get into a relationship because of that bigger fear of being alone?
I think when I was younger maybe, but now no.
Hmm.
And I say that just because I'm 47 years old. I'll be 48 in like 2 months. Um, I know myself. I know that being with somebody who's not a good fit for me is just going to make me feel worse, and it's going to bring a lot of drama and unnecessary stress to my life. And I
Right.
I learned that through experience.
You
Like
either
it
pick
was.
misery or loneliness. Pick one, right?
Right, exactly. And honestly, I have discovered that I would rather be lonely than be miserable because I just like I said, there's I I would much rather feel a little lonely or sad because I'm feeling lonely rather than waking up in the morning next to somebody who I might not like, who I feel like is just taking up space and making my life miserable. Like it's one thing if I make my life miserable, but it's another thing if someone else makes my life miserable.
Yeah. Here we read that the pandemic has exacerbated loneliness in gay men. The messages of social isolation and not getting close to people in response to COVID have exacerbated the entire issue of loneliness in gay men. This is an excerpt from the SydneyGayCounseling.com, which is a counseling service in Sydney, Australia, for any of our listeners down under. Um, I think when I think of loneliness, traditionally for me, it was limited to the elderly, to,
Mhm,
older folks or even parents with this, what do they call it? The empty nest syndrome.
mhm,
After their kids grow up, they go to college, and after college, they kind of do not return, or now they do return home, but before they didn't really return home, they went off and started their own lives. And families, excuse me, the older parents would have this empty nest syndrome. So that's what I thought of loneliness. And then then you don't have family around, especially in Anglo cultures
mhm.
that are a little bit more disconnected. Traditionally, English, Anglo culture, they aren't as close of a family as an Italian American family, for instance, just because the network, the groupings, the family structure is much more enmeshed, you know. But that might be another reason why the US is so lonely. Is just because, traditions and ethnicities that it's just different to it's impossible to encapsulate all of them into one generalization, but,
Well, I
um
mean, honestly, I feel like it's I suppose like everything in life, it's a combination of, how you were brought up, like your family structure and how you are today. Like I'll use myself as an example. When I was a little kid, I grew up around a lot of family. Like I had grandmothers, I had great grandmothers, I had uncles, I had aunts, I had cousins, and up until I was almost 10 years old, I was never alone.
Right.
Like there was always someone around me. There was always something to do. There was always people who were there for me. And then when I was almost 10 years old, my mom uh, was going to get remarried and we moved to the East Coast. So we left everything that I had known. And so then it was just me and my mom and my brother and my new stepfather. So I went from having these big family celebrations, and being around family and just being loud. Like I was actually, I'm amusingly, because you've known me for a few years now,
Right.
I used to be a very loud person, you know,
Right.
because being in that environment, you had to yell. And moving away from all of that, and one of the first things that I had to learn how to do was stop yelling when I spoke.
And did you
So
think because growing up as a Black American, your family structure was much more intimate?
I mean, it's not something that obviously you think of when you're a child, because like when I was a kid, that was my life. Like it was, my uncles and aunts and cousins, and that's just who I that was my family. That's who I was around. As I've gotten older, and I have migrated away from family,
Mhm.
I can understand that. Like I have one grandmother left, and um I last saw my grandmother in 2019.
Right.
I hope to see her this summer because I think she's going to go see my mom, but um I went from being surrounded by my family to being right now in my life very isolated from my family. Like
Do you feel lonely?
I have times when I feel lonely. I mean, I feel like I think that's just a part of life to
Do you feel that a partner would fill that void, or being around your, let's say, your original family, your parents, or creating a chosen family, your friend groups? Which one would satisfy that need?
for me personally, or
Yes,
just
for you.
um that's a great question. I think for me personally, it could be a combination of those because honestly, um I have not lived near family in a very long time. So I have often used my chosen family to sort of fill in that gaps, to fill in some gaps, for instance. Like, and my family, we're not very, like, we don't, it's not the same as when I was a child. Like when I was a
Right.
kid, we did have like the big Thanksgivings and the big Christmases and where you had 20 people celebrating. And now, for Thanksgiving, I don't do anything necessarily. I might go and hang out with friends, or I
But I
might,
think in
you
general,
know.
traditions have dwindled.
Well, I think traditions might have dwindled. In my case, it's because we all migrated away. We all left California, like all of my uncles and aunts and
So is the
yeah.
U.S. It's is the U.S. A victim of its own success because there are so many different opportunities for work that you might be, and it's such a big country that people migrate to the other opposite part of the country for work and leave their extended family behind.
I mean, that is a possibility, but it's also, I mean, for me, it's kind of like it's just that's kind of what happened.
Let's take this back. Yes, I get it. You move out of your hometown with your partner that you think you're going to live a long time with.
Well, that
Um,
wasn't my hometown.
what do you mean? But you grew up in North Carolina.
Right. I grew up in North Carolina, but at the time I was living in the mountains of North Carolina. I had done my undergrad and master's at a university in the mountains of North Carolina, and
Right,
I
but
worked.
sticks. All I care about is North Carolina because I'm trying to pinpoint why people, especially in the US, leave to go cross country and all this stuff, okay? So
Okay.
you left for love. I get it. A lot of people would have left for a tech job, for instance,
I mean,
from
I've literally moved across country several times. The first time was because of my parents. The second time was because of love. The third time was because of curiosity. I had, was like, why not?
why didn't you go back to North Carolina to where you grew up at instead of where you ended up now?
Went where I could find a job.
You're saying there's no jobs in North Carolina?
No, no, there's plenty. But so, for instance, when I left North Carolina, I moved to San Francisco. And so I was in San Francisco. When I left San Francisco, I went to Germany for 3 months.
Forget
Uh,
Germany 3 months. That's
no, no, that's a part of the story. And the reason why that's important is because when I left Germany for 3 months, when it was time to come back, I had to find a job. So I reached out to all of my friends who were in the United States, all over San Francisco, North Carolina, DC. And I was like, hey, I need help. And the reason why I did not go back to North Carolina was because a friend in DC helped me find a job in DC, and that's why I was there.
but most people would say, "I wanna go be around I'm not saying most people 'cause clearly that they don't, but
Hmm.
I would say some people would go back to where they grew up, their hometown, and
Sure.
say, "Okay, this isn't a total shit show. I have family here. I'm just gonna get a job here."
I've always been somewhat independent. Like my mother raised me to be sort of an independent person. Like I'm not the person who normally reaches out and asks for help. Like
It's
if
not help. I'm just
like
saying
no, no, but I'm saying like so
most
like the
people grow
idea,
up
for
stay in
instance,
there they stay
like
pretty
right, like
like
so like the idea of going, like I briefly at one point in time did live in the same town as my mother. Um and it was just kind of, it was strange because my mom was trying to adjust to life without her kids. So it made for a strange dynamic, being in the same town because I was very much used to just going home. Like I have keys, I'm just going to walk in the house. And mom was like, you don't live here. Like while this will always be your home, this is not, you don't live here. So you can't just walk in and out like, because at the time I was an adult, I had graduated from college. I was in my early 20s, and so I got that, but it took me a moment to understand that. Now, of course, being an adult that lives on my own and lives in my own house. I totally get that, you know?
I
Like, I
understand that, but, you're still not answering my question, and I'm sorry if I'm being a little too Ben Shapiro-y, but I'm trying to understand why would you not stay in the same vicinity, even if it's an hour away? Let's say your hometown is small.
Mhm.
Why would you stay closer to family?
Why would I need to?
Well, that's where I'm getting at, because the epidemic of loneliness has also to do with a disconnection of your family group. I would say in Europe, not to, talk too much about Europe is amazing, but there is a sense that I have 17 cousins, and most of them haven't left the city that they were born in. And
Right.
that's a trend that's pretty much, um common in Europe. They don't
Right.
go and leave the country or the city unless they have to. There have been trends where, because they've
So
emigrated because of social or economic
I think
reasons.
I can here's the answer to your question because I understand what you're trying to get at. So here's the answer. Um and then of course it's slightly long, but growing up, as I mentioned, like of course I was around all of my family growing up. One of the things that my mother noticed was that I mean, my family, we didn't have a lot of money. So a lot of my uncles and aunts lived at home into their adulthood. Like they stayed
Mhm.
living with my grandmother. Um, and my mom saw that and she didn't want that for us. She wanted my brother and I to be independent people. Like she was just like, "No, when you're an adult, you're an adult. You need to start your life."
Right.
So she flat out told me, she told me like, "Here I am. I'm a 17-year-old kid. Trying to look into college." She flat out told me that on my birthday, she had my birthday and time down. She was like, "If you are not out of this house on your 18th birthday, your stuff will be on the front lawn and you will be essentially kicked out. So you better have a plan." And I thought, well,
Yeah, try
that
to do that now with
that
your
sucks. But that was her way of sort of like tough love because she saw how some of my uncles and aunts just depended on my grandmother
right,
into their adulthood, into their 20s and 30s. And she was like, "I do not want that for my kids." And so, needless to say, I made sure that I was enrolled in a university, so on my 18th birthday, I did not get kicked out of the house. 2
right.
years later, because my brother is 2 years younger than me, 2 years later, my brother got the exact same speech, but my brother didn't believe her. And I went home to be there on my brother's 18th birthday, and needless to say, my brother's 18th birthday, my mother looked at him and was like, "Why are you still here?"
Mm.
Like, "Why? You need to go out and start your life." And that was it. So needless to say, by the end of the day, on my brother's 18th birthday, he was out of the house.
Okay, so
Now,
that may be also a very sense of Americana in it, but I don't see anyone no one in Europe has ever done that. I don't feel
and
like
that's
anyone has
kind of
said,
the
"Get
thing.
out if
It's not it's
you're 18,
my
get out," like
my mom, like I said, she took a very like at the time, like I honestly felt like it was a very harsh thing. Like
I
I
I'd
know
say
people,
I'd say, yeah.
I know
I mean,
people.
that's why people use college as a transition, if
Right.
anything.
Right, exactly. But I know people like some of my friends who are my age who have had children, so I'm fascinated that, like one of my friends, she let her kids live with her until their 20s. But that's how she is. She wanted her kids there. She did not want them to have to suffer like she did. Like she was like, "You can stay here, you can save your money and like
Yeah.
work," and that's awesome. My mother was not that way. And so for me, that's one of the reasons why like in learning to go out and be independent and start my life, I learned that from my mother, like that I don't have to be around family. Like I can go where I feel like is the best place for me to be.
Okay, so let's say she she was the mother eagle that threw her little baby chicks out of the
Mhm,
nest,
mhm,
And
And now we had to fly.
if you fly, if not, you just die on your on landing.
I
Uh,
mean, I don't think she would let us die, obviously. She's actually kind of softened a little as she's gotten older, which is really funny. But but no, she would never, like, even now, like, if I know that if something happened and I needed to go home and live with my mother, I would be open. It would be fine. I could do that. That's in my mind. That's also a very last. That's a last resort, sort of deal.
so in context of social connections or
Hmm.
lack of creating loneliness, that's where I'm getting to,
Hmm.
is that understanding that your story multiplied times 150 million could create a society where there's an epidemic of loneliness, because if everyone is throwing their baby chicks off, doesn't mean they're all going to be successful and fly out. A lot of them are going to break on landing.
True.
So social connection influences health, mental health. For the Surgeon General last year to state that there's an ongoing epidemic in this country of loneliness, and Gen Z being the ones that are even more lonely, and Gen Zs are not leaving the house that they grew up in
Right.
anytime soon. They're staying into their 30s, some of them. Um, or they plan on it. They say they require even more money than the millennials to leave the house. Things are expensive.
They
But when
are.
it comes to social connection, here it says hhs.gov, our epidemic of loneliness and isolation. The processes are biology, psychology, and behavioral. And the components of social connection always comes out in the outcomes of health created are heart disease, stroke, diabetes, can lead to an individual's morbidity and premature mortality.
Of
So,
course.
lack of social connections can also affect your physical health.
Hmm.
So, if you don't have that social connection, or maybe your family structure was toxic that you don't, not saying that yours was, but some people don't want to be, especially gay people, they don't want to go home. Maybe they didn't have the best uh,
True.
home environment that they grew up in, or even if it was okay, it
Hmm.
still wasn't the best where you're going to thrive and be your best. Fine, leave the house,
Right.
and leave the house early. But you need to find some kind of community, some kind of
Yeah.
friend group, or your partner that is your cheerleader and your connection.
Well.
Because if not, if doing so, if you live this life, and I can tell you from experience that I feel lonely sometimes, and I think a lot of people do.
Hmm.
And I used to smoke cigarettes for 24 years because I called them my little friends, and they would really, I would pass the time between things that I needed to do, between for breaks or while you're driving or whatever. So my little boredom, my periods of boredom would be non-existent because I would just smoke a cigarette and I would get the little high, and then you go on to doing what you needed to do. Coping mechanisms, that's what they are. So
Right. And I would say everyone obviously deals with loneliness in different ways. Like some people, um, find productive ways to deal with their loneliness. They work on projects. They keep themselves busy so that they
yeah,
don't feel that. Then other people,
volunteering is good.
volunteering, other people, like especially during the pandemic, bought pets, to
Mhm.
keep them company. And and
Well, I hope they didn't buy them. I hope they adopted
well,
them.
some of the well, people buy them, people adopt them, it's
I
but
don't judge. I do judge.
but they that's what they did, and that helped them. But it really boils down to just knowing yourself and knowing what works. Like what can I do? I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling down or something like that. What do you do to deal with that? And everyone does different things to deal with that. Like if you have a group of people that you can reach out to, then fantastic. But if you don't have that group of people, what do you do? You know?
Well, that's why I say, I've lived in Europe, I lived in North America. I'm a really good witness of both cultures and the way they're structured. In the US, we're very individualistic. It's curated, our personal lives are curated. So we built the life like we want it. Each neighbor's life looks completely different.
True.
One volunteers at the animal shelter, and the other one is a pilot, da da da, whatever.
Right.
Everyone has their own lives. Not to
Mhm.
say that they don't in Europe, but in Europe, everyone kind of eats at the same time. They all have whatever town you're in. You have that saints for a lot of it has to do with religion, or at least the traditions do. So you have always like one big festival that that town celebrates, and that brings everyone together at least once a year to create a sense of community. Sense of community the U.S. has around July 4th, which we just celebrated. Everyone comes together for that celebration.
Mhm.
But other than that, I feel like we're very separated. We're very much, "This is my kingdom, this is my piece of the lawn," and step away. We're very reticent on making in general, in making friends. Strangers scare us, and we'd
I
rather be
would
alone than take chances.
I would say as a culture, the United States, that is true for some, obviously. Like it's very Mm, like, I know some people, like, for instance, I have some friends who know all of their neighbors and get together with all the neighbors, and they've made this community. Then you have, like, even in my neighborhood, like, on the 4th, I noticed that there were several groups of neighbors that were hanging out at one of my neighbors' houses. Um, Me personally, I was by myself on the 4th,
Right.
because I didn't I I don't mind that. Like, I've always kind of been that sort of person. Like,
Yeah, but you have a really good friend group. You've just been
I
out
do.
so many times the last few weeks. It's
Right,
good to take
exactly. So, like, I have my moments when I'm very social, and then
Right.
I have my moments when I'm very solitary.
Right. And
Um,
some people need more connection than others.
right. Like,
Extroverts, introverts. I
like,
need I need sorry to
no, go
to
ahead.
to interject, but I need a lot of socialization, but then a lot of downtime.
Right,
And, you have to have a lot of people available that fulfill you to satisfy that need, or a partner that's always game,
right. Now,
because of
I would
you
say the only thing I would caution people is, um, the idea that a partner is going to be that one person who's going to save you from loneliness, that puts a lot of pressure on
Yeah,
one
it's
person.
usually not the case, yeah.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of like, yes, it's great to have a partner, it's great to make a life with a partner, but at the same time, you know you can't put essentially all of your eggs in one basket, as we would say. Like, one of my really good friends here in town, um, I know that's what he wants. He tends to um, live a solitary lifestyle. He has his dogs, um, but my fear for him is that that's what he wants. He wants a partner, but I feel like that partner is going to eventually have to, carry a heavy load because he's not a social person. He's not.
Right.
He doesn't go out and do a lot of the things. So whomever he's with is going to essentially become his, reason for not being lonely. And for me, I just feel like that's a lot to put on a person. You know?
Yeah, maybe these statistics will help us gain some perspective. A new APA poll says 1 in 3 Americans feels lonely every week. In May 2023, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy called loneliness a public health epidemic. The latest Healthy Minds monthly poll from American Psychiatric Association (APA) finds that early in 2024, 30% of adults say they have experienced feelings of loneliness at least once a week over the past year, while 10% say they are lonely every day.
Mhm.
Younger people were more likely to experience these feelings, with 30% of Americans aged 18 to 34 saying they were lonely every day or several times a week. And single adults are nearly twice as likely as married adults to say they have been lonely on a weekly basis over the past year, 39% versus 22%. It does help to have a partner. Um, let
True.
me let me continue by saying that when Americans, this poll says, when Americans feel lonely, they report easing these feelings through many different means. Top means to ease these lonely feelings are 50% of them find a distraction, which is like TV, podcasts, social media. We'll get on to that later because I don't think social media is healthy at all.
Mhm.
41% go for a walk. Walking is amazing. It's one of the healthiest things you can do for your physical and mental health. I've always believed that. I walk every day. Even if I'm fat, I love it. It makes me feel amazing in my brain.
Mhm.
38% reach out to friends or family. I do that. I like to reach out, call, start a podcast.
Yes, I was gonna
Um,
say I've gotten those calls, and here I am on the podcast.
yes, you've been recruited.
Yes.
31% connect to a pet. I adopted a pet
I recall that too. I
4
have
years ago, and
yes.
31% exercise. So I've done literally the top 4 things that you could do.
And I feel like a lot of people have. Like in listening to your list, I work out, and of course I will entertain myself with other things like social media or music or reading or watching TV or um yeah, it's just like I said, everybody is different. Like
Though it gets better. It says 26% eat more than usual.
I mean, I would say most certainly because if you're especially during the pandemic.
Oh
Oh my
god,
goodness.
yes. I gained so
Yeah,
much
that
weight.
was yeah, because it was really like you're at home, you're alone, you can't go out. You saw friends on Zoom and other things like that. I mean, if you had the time or and the food, if you were bored, a lot of people eat when they get bored. They really do,
Absolutely. I kn
you know?
I'm a snacker.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm a huge fan of ice cream. I absolutely love ice cream. And I have to like limit myself on the amount of ice cream that I can eat because
don't you
I
have, like,
know
always, like, a ready to
oh,
go Ben& and Jerry's?
I always have ice cream in my freezer, always, because I
Hey,
love it.
hey, that's good.
Right.
Um, that's why people visit you. They know that you're the ice cream man.
Well, they don't eat my ice cream. I don't not there I don't give it away. Like
When you open your door, does the little ice cream man music turn on?
no, but I do have a Pillsbury Doughboy cookie jar that
Of
when I
course you do.
remove the head, it makes its little laugh. I do have that.
Can you do it? What is the little laugh?
No, I would prefer to just, if you don't know what that is, just look him up. Exactly. He'll yes.
Poke the belly.
Yes. I
So people, they treat they so people basically find ways to combat loneliness.
True.
Um,
But it's interesting. I went out with my friends last night and I noticed this man at the bar. He was an older man. I don't think I'd ever seen him before there, but I don't know if he was visiting or if he, was a regular, but he was there by himself. And every now and then I would watch him just to sort of see like did he talk to anyone or what did he do? And he just stood there and every now and then he might talk to the bartender, but he just kind of stood in the same spot and he had his drink or drinks and then I guess eventually he left. And I thought I had to wonder, because at that time you had also texted me saying that we were going to discuss loneliness today and I thought of him and I just thought, when you look and I looked at his face, I could see this sort of like hint of loneliness, but at the same time, being that I don't know him, um, I did not approach him because in that situation, it's kind of like it's kind of weird, like it's like you see sometimes that someone might be a little lonely and you might want to reach out to them, but at the same time, it's not necessarily either wanted or
No,
or
everyone's
acceptable.
craving it, yeah,
Right, exactly. Because in my mind, I'm like, well, if I start talking to him and he thinks I'm hitting on him, in my mind, I'm like, I'm
right.
not trying to hit on him. I just see like, but it's
Some
very
people know the
different.
difference between friends or
Right.
friendship and
But
hitting on.
I will say, like when I've gone to like certain like parties, like if I've been like in a party situation and I've seen someone standing by themselves, I will, I
Have you
will
ever
reach
been
out
this
to them.
guy?
I have been that guy. I've been to parties where I don't know anyone and I'm standing there and I'm kind of like, all right, this is
No, have you ever gone out on purpose because you feel lonely?
oh, um no, actually,
Mm,
because for me, if I were to do that, to cure that loneliness, I would need to be around someone who kind of knew me, and
mm,
I don't. I'm not. I'm like for me, for one, a bar and drinking, that's a very social thing, and so for me to stand in a bar and have a drink by myself would be very, very strange for me. Like
would it
like
make you feel more vulnerable than you already are?
it would make me feel, I think, uncomfortable
Mm,
just because my comfort zone would be sitting at home and eating some ice cream. That's going to make me feel better. Me standing at a bar by myself and having a drink is not actually, that would actually be counterproductive for me because I would be like, I'm in a big room of all these people that I don't know, and I don't necessarily want to try
let's say
to,
tomorrow you fall into the despairs of loneliness,
okay.
okay? 'Cause, clearly you haven't felt it yet. Uh,
Oh, I have.
okay, so what
Yeah.
have you done to remedy it or to combat it?
For me, I reach out to people. That's one of the first
Okay,
things that I do is I reach out, not just anyone. I reach out to the people who are the closest to me just to say, "Hey, I'm kind of in a dark place right now. I need just talk to me."
right.
You know? Just
We're social beings. If we don't
right,
interact,
right.
things shut down.
Right, and honestly, like, that's one of the reasons, like, for
It's a
instance, like
survival thing.
as I've mentioned in previous podcasts, you know, I'm incredibly close with my mother. We talk every Sunday morning at nine
Right.
o'clock. That's just what we do. That's our scheduled time, and we will talk for like 2 hours, and it's very fulfilling for me. We talk about everything. We cover what's been going on with the family. We cover like what's been going on within our own lives,
Do you
and
guys gossip?
uh, I wouldn't say we gossip. My mother simply just gives me the family news, basically.
You remember
So
that show 227?
oh yeah, of
I
course.
feel like that's you guys on the phone.
Uh, I mean, it's not quite in that way, but in a way, I could see the comparison for sure because my mother does tell me certain things that are going on in the neighborhood, and she's like, "Oh, do you remember this person? Well, this person just blah blah." I'm like, "Yep, okay."
I feel like
So
your mom's Jack Hay,
no, that's my mom would not be Jack A. Not
or
at
is she
not.
more Marla that keeps everything together?
She would be more of the Marla Gibbs
Then
character,
you're
yes.
Jack Hay, causing all the havoc.
Uh, no,
Mm.
I was never one to cause havoc.
Mm.
Never, actually. It's really
It
kind of
was a good show. This
it
is
was a great
another
show.
thing, how
Yeah,
another comment on, like, the '90s of some of my favorite shows were black shows. They were
yeah,
Family Matters,
yeah,
The
yeah.
Cosby Show,
Those were great
227,
shows. Yeah.
A Different World I love. I mean, a lot of
Mhm.
these shows, and then suddenly 2000s came and they all went away. They
Yes.
all went away, and I was
Mhm.
like, "What the hell happened?"
I actually I was watching a documentary that was kind of discussing that the
Mm.
other day, and yeah, no one can explain it.
I
It
feel
just
like
they're out.
that's why I keep saying I feel like we were more diverse in the '90s than we are now. I think we're now much more segregated than ever in, the last 40 years.
Hmm.
Um, because I think we were more, diversity was more mainstream. So It could just be my Gen X exennial mind, but these shows were on major networks. Everyone was exposed to them, and we didn't think, "Oh, that's a black family." We said, "That's a family," and they just happened to be black, and we all joined in on being a part of their family for 30 minutes,
I
you know?
mean, I will say there are plenty of people who still have shows like that, that they watch, where
On A
they feel like,
ABC, on
well,
CBS?
I would say not necessarily like black family shows, but I mean like just
Now
shows in
if you
general
wanna create a
where,
black show, you gotta put it on BET.
well, I mean, I'm just saying like a show in general. Like there are plenty of people who sort of like find that community within the people who watch the show. Like a lot of people love Sex in the City, and
Yeah.
and then a lot of people like, I
Yeah,
mean,
but
for
Sex
like,
and the City is very white.
right, but I mean I'm just talking about shows in general. I'm not talking about like black shows. I mean, just finding a connection through like through TV shows, or people who watch the same TV shows. I agree in that, obviously we had a lot more sort of black people on TV in the 90s, and we
Well, not
all,
only that, I mean, Margaret Cho also had her own series for
yeah,
a little bit, All
yeah,
American Girl,
yeah.
and then there were tons of diverse programming for network television, I feel like now all that has been completely segregated.
Well, and on top of that, you know, our social structure is different than the 90s. So for instance, in the 90s, you would have, you'd watch something on Thursday night. Let's say you watched the Cosby Show in a different world on Thursday night, and then you went to school or you went to work, Friday, and you were first off in that location. You were in a school. You were at like a job site where you could actually talk and interact with people. And nowadays, a lot of people work from home. There are some people who go to school remotely. So that socialization isn't happening because you're more isolated. And
Well, let's go down to music. I feel like, some of my favorite groups were, Boys to Men. But what I'm saying is, let's say the white kid, the suburban kid, was more exposed to diverse music, Hispanic or black music than they are now. I feel now white kids are watching white rappers like Post Malone and Jack Harlow and stuff, and they're not really listening too much to hip hop or R&B like they used to. I think black people are, but not that white suburban kid was. Where they were in the 90s, we were in the 90s, and we were highly influenced by the music of that time.
well, I think that for one, I obviously I can't say what a lot of people are listening to because like honestly, I have a very diverse playlist of music. So, and also back in the 90s, we all got our music from the same source. We all got our music from
Right,
the radio. We got our music from tapes and CDs.
right.
Now you have 50 different platforms where you could get music from.
Mhm.
So there's no one specific place that's going to, like it's not a radio station in your city anymore. It's like you can live in
Right.
Antarctica and listen to, a certain type of music online
Yeah.
and have access to all of, that music library
I
online.
can see that, I can see that.
So there's not that sort of like that radio station in your town is not bringing you all together on that common, like, because I remember like as a
But
kid, some like
what you just said is exactly what I'm getting at,
right,
is
exactly, because like I
bringing us
remember like
all together. We
yeah,
have
like
this
you would
sense of
hear a
community.
song on the radio, and
Mhm.
one of your friends might be like, "Hey, did you hear the song? Turn it on this station."
We don't have that now.
You don't
The
have.
last
I mean,
time
yeah,
we had that kind of feeling was Game of Thrones, and that was years ago.
yeah.
But we don't have that commonality anymore, you know?
But even
Um
then, like with certain, like I said, with certain shows like that, like, if you watch it on the day that it comes out, then yes, but then there are so many people like me, I watched Game of Thrones once it was done, so I could sit and
Yeah.
binge the whole thing.
Yeah,
So,
so
like,
you're we're off. Yeah.
right, exactly, so, like, I, was a few years off when it came to Game of Thrones, but then there are some people who I would see posting on Facebook, "Did you see tonight's episode? Oh my gosh, I can't believe she did this," and I'm
So
just kinda
even
like,
streaming is
you know
really a product of our individualistic lifestyle
Right,
in America.
exactly, like, streaming allows for you to listen or view it, whenever you want to. Like like in the past, like you said, in the 90s, you were in front of the TV on Thursday night watching the Cosby Show because that's when it came on. And then once it was gone, it was gone. You couldn't
Yeah.
see it again until they did a rerun. Now, if they had that same phenomena, it would come on Thursday night, sure. But if, let's say, you were busy Thursday night, you could stream it Friday or Saturday,
But all this created a sense of community and created
Exactly.
a cohesive,
Right.
um, uh, oneness, you know?
Yes, we all had
It
that in common.
didn't matter if you were black, if you were Asian, Hispanic, white,
I
whatever.
I remember when Michael Jackson would release a new song, and he would
Oh,
release new
yeah.
video, and it was always a huge event. Like,
Yeah.
everyone would be
Massive.
gathered around their TVs at that time, during the 90s, and it was just like, "All right," like, his
And
new
everyone
song came
saw
out,
it.
and it
Everyone.
was, and it was a huge spectacle. It was on the news the next day. That's what you talked about in school. It was just like, "Did you guys see it last night? Oh my gosh!" And when he spun around, and like, that was the thing. Nowadays, it's not really quite like that. Like, if someone releases a new song, um, sure, a lot of people might listen to it initially, but
No, but it
there's
has to be
always
like a
gonna but there's
Taylor
always
Swift. If not, nothing really.
well, and even then, that's very specific to the Swifties. Like, my friends who are Swifties, they're on it. Like, when she releases a song, they are up at midnight listening to that song. And that
Yeah, but that's
but they have that community, hence
yeah, and that
Swifties.
fan
you know?
they're fanatics, not just fans.
But that's the thing.
Right.
You can still have that sort of community, but it's really, it's that group of fans that have come together to support each other.
And that's great. That is a
Right.
sense of community, and that's very positive.
Right.
And it's a positive community. So
Right.
that's great. And I think that's listen, I think being gay in a society that's too individualistic is a good thing because we have a ready-made community. Um, even if some of it is toxic, you can still have people that know what you're going through because just the way you are. Okay.
Right. I mean, and I will say,
So
and
so
that's
so
this.
that's why I think that's what's missing is that through line of commonality of everyone, uh, knowing without even having to say a word of what you're going through.
Well, I guess that's kind of the one thing that when we discuss, like, gay people and gay topics and like this, um, we all have that thing in common. Like, we all are not straight. So we have that thing in common. And then from there, hopefully we have similar experiences. Like, I can say
Right.
for people of my generation, a lot of us have similar experiences. So, like, when I talk to people who are Gen X like me, you know, we have these, like we just did. We were talking about, a different world and all these other things. It's like, as soon as we start talking about stuff like that, we're like, oh man, like, this was such a great thing. Like um, when I was recently out with my friends, one of my friends was wearing this outfit that, my friend, who's just a couple of years older than me, he said, "You know who he looks like? He said, "He looks like a fly girl from In Living Color." And
Oh
I
my
was
god, I
like,
love In Living
"Oh
Color.
my god, he does." I mean, and we
So
told my
many
friend
famous
this.
people came out of In Living
Right,
Color.
exactly, and we told my friend this, and I was so glad that he understood what we were talking about. He was like, "Oh man,"
Yep.
he's like, not J Lo though, not J Lo." We were like, "Ah, you could have been," like, so. But it was
Absolutely. I mean,
great to have that connection.
yeah, we and that's I don't think people nowadays, younger kids, have that because everyone is watching different things. There's so much everything's so democratized and also disconnected that I
I've
think that's why Gen Z is having an issue
I've
with
seen
loneliness.
younger people bond over it's very similar to what we just did, of things from their youth, like
But those are
being
millennials.
well, for instance, like being in, let's say, a gay bar during show tunes, and all of a sudden the SpongeBob SquarePants song
Yeah,
comes
that's
on.
right, before us, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, after, so
Yeah,
but you hear
70s
and
after.
you see just the joy on people's faces because that's their part of their
Yeah,
childhood.
we were in college when that
Right,
happened.
exactly. So like, but that's their thing. That's what they can bond on.
Right,
That's just like we just bonded over, like stuff from the '90s.
right.
Like my friend whose birthday it is today. Me and my older friend were talking. We mentioned the Love Boat, and he's like, I have no
Mm.
idea what that is.
Oh my
He's
god.
turning he's turning
Oh,
28
love
today.
boat.
I'm 47. My other friend is 53. So when we talk about the Love Boat, we're like, oh yeah, we that was like the 70s and 80s. And our friend, of course, who's just turning 28 today, wasn't born. He had no clue what
Oh,
that
they
was.
have no clue who, like,
Right,
Lucille Ball was
right.
or
You
a
know,
lot of these people, yeah, it's
but he has stuff from his own generation that his generation can bond on. So
like SpongeBob.
I don't know. I'm not
I'll
that
take the
generation.
Love Boat any day.
I was gonna say. I was gonna say. I'm like, if I was 28, I could tell you, but
Yeah,
I am not 28. So
anyway, so I think we're on to something, and it's basically, if you're lonely, it's not your fault, okay? And there are ways out of it, okay? Call a friend. Sometimes a friend is all you need, and, build a community.
I
Pets are
mean,
always also really good companions, but
honestly, I feel like for everyone, you need to
stay
learn what's
active.
gonna work for you.
Yeah.
Like I know sometimes for me, sometimes I will sing in the shower because
Yeah.
that's what will make me happy. You know, like if I'm just feeling
Yeah,
really
but
down,
it's
that's
it's really the social interactions that you
right.
need.
Well, I'm sorry. Like I should say
Something chemical there. Yeah,
if I'm
yeah.
feeling down, I would
Down,
do
yeah.
that. But if I'm feeling lonely,
Yeah,
then
because
that's
let's
different.
not get
Yes.
depression and loneliness,
Right. That's true.
uh,
That
mis
they are two very different
they're
things. Yeah.
very different.
Yes.
Loneliness is temporary, and it's not a clinical thing. It's really a lack of something, which is a lack of interactions and a
Right.
lack of that thing that we have built into our
Right.
humanity.
Right.
We need to talk to people. We're not the worst thing you can do to a human being is put them in isolation.
Of course.
That's
which
literally punishment in
which is
prison.
why a lot of people did not do well during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah.
You know. Yeah. So.
Yeah, a lot of them went freaking even just running errands
Oh
and
yeah.
talking to people
Well,
is helpful.
that's the reason why. Like once we could leave our homes, people went crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And just yeah, like it was crazy to me to go out and see people again who I hadn't seen in over a year,
I know.
and then it was just like, oh my gosh, everybody was just it was amazing.
We were happy to get back into society, and then a lot of them will never go back if there's another
Hmm.
pandemic because they
Oh
know
yeah.
how bad it was.
Oh yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
I think we need each other more than ever, and, we realize we need to build better social and positive social,
Right.
interactions,
I would say
and it's okay to feel lonely and to be lonely.
I
It
agree, and
happens to all of us.
I would say, like, just for the listeners, like if you're in a situation where you're out and someone comes up and just, starts a conversation, you can be polite and at least, have a
Hear 'em out.
conversation. You don't have to just completely brush them off because that person could just need a person to talk to, and
Not only that, we're here to learn.
Right,
something
exactly.
you could learn something from someone.
Right, like, and I've done that before where I've had people just talk to me because I I for some odd reason, and I'd have to tell this anytime I'm in a relationship with someone, I have to tell them, by the way, random people are going to talk to me because I guess I have a very friendly face, and random people will just come and talk to me
That's
about
good.
anything, which I find fascinating. Sometimes, 'cause sometimes
That happens to
people
me a lot too.
people will tell you too not I don't wanna say too much, but they will tell you way more than you ever thought that you ever needed to know
Yeah,
about them.
sometimes people overshare, but
Right. So, but I would say, what, especially like it's just understand that sometimes we all need somebody to talk to. So if somebody comes and talks to you, just be kind and
right.
talk to them. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that you have to talk to them all night. That doesn't mean you have
Yeah.
to ignore your friends or what you're doing. I mean, there are polite ways to end a conversation, but just be a kind person.
Yeah, absolutely. And find your environment. If you are single and gay, maybe the suburbs aren't for you to live alone in a big house.
Right.
Maybe you do need something more ready made and you need the streets to be downstairs so you can have a little bit of quicker interactions with people and to be more social faster.
Right.
I don't personally like suburbs. I think they're a really bad creation because you don't get the land that you really want. It's like a tease. It's like you don't get the convenience of the city, and you still get the hassle of the traffic getting there, then once you're
Well,
there, you're kinda stuck.
I mean, once again, that comes back to just knowing yourself and knowing what you need as a person. So if you know that as a person you need to be around people, then the suburbs
Exactly.
might not be for you. You might need to be more in like a downtown environment or like a condo sort of environment or some environment that will offer you the opportunity to be more social rather than living in a rural area where you're not going to see another neighbor for
Right,
20
and you
minutes.
might need more interactions and
Right,
quicker
exactly.
and to process through a lot of them faster, where if you're in the country or in the suburbs, you might not get so many of these opportunities to have these interactions.
True. That's very true.
So, it's about putting yourself in the right environment, um, and making sure that environment is healthy for you to grow and to learn.
Right.
But, I I I just want the message out there that if anyone's feeling lonely, you're not alone and it is temporary and it will come and go throughout your life.
Yep.
You need to just build those relationships and sense of community. And it's not about always a partner. It can be about getting a pet, reconnecting with friends from, longtime friends, making new friends, joining the pottery class,
Eating
uh,
ice cream.
eating ice cream and watching your favorite show that kills
Right.
loneliness.
Yes.
Taking a walk with your neighbor that you just befriended, that's pretty fucking cool, you know?
Yes. Yes.
So, walking with anyone that makes you smile and laugh is always a positive thing, and it fills you
Or
up.
walking by yourself can be just as
Walking
positive.
by yourself, yep.
Yeah.
It gets those chemicals in your brain, going, so anyway, well, thank you, James, for joining this episode on loneliness, and I hope everyone can join us on our next episode. If you like this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this episode, James. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks. Talk to you later.
Have a good one.
You too.
If you or someone you know are in crisis and need help, please reach out to a caring professional at SAMHSA's national helpline in the U.S. at 1 800 662 HELP. That is 1 800 662 4357. Or you can simply text 988 on your phone. More information can be found by going on findtreatment.gov. And remember, you're never alone.